Welcome to Infinity News. Hit subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Today we're doing a deep dive, just for you, looking at some reports and transcripts that really dissect something fascinating. It's this very public and increasingly kind of nasty feud between two incredibly high-profile figures. You know the ones.
Absolutely. These aren't just famous people. Their actions, their words, they really shape conversations globally, don't they? Technology, politics. And when they clash like this, well, you feel the waves. We've got material here offering one specific commentator's view on it all. And it frames this whole thing in a, let's say, unique way. Less political analysis, more something else.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack that specific take. What are the comparisons being made? What moments are highlighted? What's the commentary suggesting this whole thing is really about? Think of this as your fast track to understanding one, well, pretty pointed perspective on a very modern kind of public spat.
Exactly. We'll follow the story as this commentary lays it out, how a relationship apparently went from close, or perceived as close, to really, really adversarial. We'll look at the specific jabs, the claims being reported, and what, according to this view, might actually be at stake.
Okay, let's dive in. The sources, they kick off with a comparison that just grabs you immediately. It calls this whole thing the most exciting public breakup since the days of Brangelina.
Brangelina. That's quite the starting point, isn't it? It deliberately takes this, major political and business clash and frames it like celebrity gossip. Putting it alongside Brangelina or Bennifer, these huge celebrity couples whose relationships were all over the tabloids, suggests this feud is really about public spectacle, about personal drama.
Yeah, it immediately makes it feel personal, not just policy disagreements. And apparently these two even had their own couple name, something like Elon.
Elon, yeah. That detail is presented as proof of how supposedly so close they were, like those celebrity couples.
Yeah.
It reinforces this idea that this wasn't just, two powerful guys who knew each other. It suggests a real connection, maybe even admiration, which makes the current fight seem more like a personal betrayal, a real breakup playing out for everyone to see, not just a policy fight.
But it wasn't a sudden thing, according to this commentary. It was seen as a long time coming, like it built up. And where are they now? Well, it's definitely gone beyond celebrity gossip.
Oh, way beyond. The comparison shifts dramatically.
Yep.
The source quotes the commentator describing the current fight not like Brangelina, but like Godzilla versus King Kong.
Okay, Godzilla versus King Kong. That's a big escalation. We're talking city-destroying monsters now.
Huge scale, huge destruction. Yeah. But, in line with the commentator's style, there's always a twist, right? The quote goes on, Godzilla versus King Kong, but if Godzilla was on ketamine and King Kong had a combover.
Okay, that paints quite a picture. Godzilla on ketamine, King Kong with a combover.
It does. And it tells you a lot about the tone, doesn't it? It acknowledges the immense power, the potential for damage when these two clash. But it also injects this element of the bizarre, the absurd, almost pathetic. One seems out of it, the other defined by something superficial. It kind of grounds this epic battle in their perceived quirks. Suggests the fight isn't just big, it's also maybe a little weird, messy, even ridiculous to watch.
So how did we get from Elon, this supposed closeness, to Godzilla on ketamine fighting King Kong with bad hair? The sources point to specific moments, things this commentator flagged as the beginning of the end.
Yeah, the commentary highlights one potential early sign. It was apparently a meeting in the Oval Office. One of them was there with the German chancellor, and the other figure shows up with a black eye.
A black eye? Seriously, in the Oval Office? That sounds dramatic.
It definitely adds a layer of personal intrigue, doesn't it? And the commentary focuses on one specific interaction during this. Apparently one figure said he offered makeup to the other guy for the black eye.
Offered him makeup.
And the offer was turned down. The first figure apparently found that interesting. Then the commentator reportedly adds this little jab like, yeah, weird, Elon, what sort of man turns down makeup?
So the focus isn't on the meeting with the chancellor, it's on this really odd personal detail, a black eye and makeup.
Exactly. It shows how this commentator interprets everything through this lens of, personal awkwardness, perceived slights. Forget international relations, it's about the weird vibe between these two guys. It suggests the tension was already there, bubbling up in these strange ways.
Okay, so after that early sign, the sources say the feud just kind of slowly simmered. Accusations started flying back and forth. What were some of those key jabs?
Well, the commentary points out a few examples that show how it moved from maybe awkwardness to more direct attacks. For instance, one figure reportedly claimed the other's policies, specifically tariffs, would tank the economy, cause a recession.
All right, so hitting on major policy, economic impact, pretty standard political attack maybe?
Right. But then the response, reportedly, wasn't about policy. It was a direct shot at the first figure's business, saying basically nobody wants to buy his company's electric cars.
Ouch. Okay, that's different. That's hitting where it hurts commercially, undermining his core success.
Definitely. It shows the shift towards attacking each other's credibility, their achievements. But then, according to the source, the commentator says ST got real. That's the phrase used, when one figure reportedly claimed he was the reason the other guy won the election.
Whoa. Okay, that is a massive escalation. Claiming you put someone in office, that changes the whole dynamic.
Huge. It brings in power, debt, influence. It's presented as a real turning point, where maybe private resentment spilled into public claims about who owes who, politically speaking.
Yeah.
The stakes just jumped way up.
And things apparently got even weirder after that. The commentary includes some quotes that sound, pretty out there.
Yeah, this is where you see the commentator really leaning into the comedic, maybe exaggerated side. The source mentions lines like one figure saying, well, you know what, Mars is a scarce old planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the other supposedly replying, oh my God, you are not the same man I used to hail.
The man I used to hail. That's quite something. Doesn't sound real.
And it wasn't. That's the key point the source includes. The commentator openly admitted he just made those specific lines up.
Ah, okay. So he's mixing reported stuff with his own deliberate fabrications.
Sure.
For effect.
Exactly. And he reportedly added that, honestly, with this feud, it's kind of hard to tell what's real and what's made up anyway, because the real stuff is so bizarre. Which is a comment in itself, right? It's saying the reality is so strange, exaggeration almost fits right in. It makes you, the listener, have to think about how much is fact, how much is performance, how much is commentary spin.
Yeah, you definitely need a filter. But even taking out the admitted jokes, the pattern described is clear. It went from personal stuff like makeup to big stuff like business and policy, then huge claims about elections, and then into this territory where it's so weird, the commentary itself starts blurring lines just to make a point about the absurdity.
Precisely. It's a narrative of decay, told through this very specific, often humorous lens, focusing on personality clashes and perceived eccentricities, moving from the small stuff to the really big stuff.
And apparently it hasn't cooled down. The source material says the fighting has only grown worse in recent days. The Godzilla vs. King Kong show is still running. What's been happening lately?
The sources give a couple of recent examples. One figure, when asked about the feud, reportedly just brushed it off, said he doesn't think about them.
Right, the classic, I'm too busy important to care move. A power play in itself.
Totally. A performance of indifference. Meanwhile, the other figure reportedly dropped a bombshell on social media. The source says he suggested the reason certain sensitive files, the Epstein files were specifically mentioned, haven't been released is because of the first figure's involvement. Though, importantly, the source adds that this post was apparently deleted pretty quickly.
Wow, bringing the Epstein files into it. That's not just mudslinging anymore. That's incredibly serious. Tying the feud to a massive, ongoing public scandal.
It's a huge leap, yeah. It really drags the conflict into dark territory, using external controversies as weapons. The fact it was deleted might suggest even he thought it went too far, maybe. Or maybe not, who knows?
And there was also something about more direct political action mentioned.
Yes. The commentary highlighted one figure really slamming a bill, backed by the other, calling it a disgusting abomination.
Yeah.
And even reportedly calling for the impeachment of the president and suggesting starting a whole new political party. So you see, it's moved beyond insults. It's now framing direct political challenges, trying to impeach, talking about new parties as part of this ongoing personal battle.
So after all this, the breakup, the makeup, the monsters, the election claims, the Epstein files stuff, what does the commentator say is actually at stake here? What's the prize in this war?
Well, the source ends this section with the commentator bringing it all back home, back to that celebrity egg with a final quip. He reportedly joked that the consequence, the outcome for the winner of this whole thing, is that the winner faces Blake Lively.
Blake Lively. Okay, referencing another public figure who had a rough time online recently, so it comes back to public image.
Exactly. It circles right back to public perception, cancellation, the whole messy world of modern fame, even for political and business figures. The suggestion seems to be that the ultimate battlefield isn't necessarily Washington or Wall Street, but public opinion. The prize, or maybe the punishment, is how you come out of it in the eyes of the public, just like a Hollywood star. It's a very telling, kind of cynical, final thought from this commentator. So we've walked through this specific commentary, this narrative of a feud. Why does this matter to you, listening right now?
Well, for one thing, it shows you how commentators use things we all recognize, celebrity gossip, movie monsters to make sense of, or at least frame, these really complex fights between powerful people. It's a way of telling the story that emphasizes personality, drama, maybe even absurdity over just dry facts.
Yeah, and it really underscores how tangled the personal and the political can get, especially with figures this prominent. The specific examples, even allowing for the humor and maybe exaggeration, they give you a feel for the kinds of things being thrown around in these high-stakes public fights. It's a reminder that how these conflicts are reported and analyzed shapes how we understand them.
And maybe the biggest takeaway is about being a savvy consumer of this stuff. When commentary deliberately blends fact, reported claims, and admitted fiction, framing politics like celebrity drama, it's really crucial to understand the commentator's angle, their techniques to really evaluate what you're hearing.
It makes you ask, what does it signify when a major clash between world-shaping figures is explained, perhaps most effectively for some, through the lens of Brangelina or Godzilla? What does that say about them, about the commentator, and maybe about how we, as a public, process power and conflict today?
So we've traced this commentator's view of the Elon breakup from makeup in the Oval Office and EV insults all the way to Epstein file allegations and monster movie metaphors.
Yeah, the source material gave us a very specific, often funny, sometimes sharp narrative arc, how a perceived close bond seemingly fell apart into this open, public, and often kind of petty warfare, escalating all the way to fundamental political challenges.
It leaves you with a final thought, perhaps. When power players engage in these intensely personal public feuds, and commentators frame it all like entertainment, what does that tell us about where politics, celebrity, and power intersect now? And how do we dig down to the reality beneath all the drama? Thanks for tuning in to Infinity News. Hit subscribe, like, and comment.